U.S. journalist Evan Gershkovich is heading home from a Russian jail after a historic prisoner exchange deal. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris welcomed Gershkovich and the other American detainees after they landed at Andrews Air Base just a short time ago. They flew in from Turkey, where the prisoner exchange took place. Biden acknowledged the difficult diplomatic choices that had to be made and the key role U.S. allies played in the swap.
The toughest call on this one for other countries is I asked them to do some things that were against their immediate self-interest, and really very difficult for them to do, particularly Germany and Slovenia. Slovenia came in at the last minute, and I tell you what, the Chancellor was incredible. He was incredible.
So the Kremlin released 16 people, journalists, dissidents and others caught up in tensions between the West and Vladimir Putin's Russia. Western nations have released 8 prisoners, among them a Russian agent convicted of murder in Berlin. It's the biggest swap of its kind since the end of the Cold War 30 years ago.
It's the news they've been waiting for in the Wall Street Journal newsroom for 491 days. Their colleague, the journalist Evan Gershkovich, has been freed from prison in Russia. While Gershkovich is the best known, he's one of 24 people in total who were released. The negotiations were complex and involved some difficult choices. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz played a key role in the swap. That's because the key figure returning back to Russia was this man, Vadim Krasikov. He was sentenced to life in prison for the 2019 murder in Berlin of a Georgian who had fought alongside Chechen militants. It was a politically complicated decision for Germany, not least because of the brazenness of the murder. It took place in broad daylight in a Berlin park just minutes away from the parliament and chancellery.
Nothing makes this decision to deport a murderer sentenced to life imprisonment after only a few years in jail an easy one. The state's interest in enforcing the prison sentence had to be weighed up against the freedom and danger to life and limb of innocent people imprisoned in Russia and those unjustly imprisoned for political reasons.
US President Joe Biden acknowledged Germany's pivotal role in the deal.
I particularly own a great sense of gratitude to the Chancellor. The demands they were making of me required me to get some significant concessions from Germany, which they originally concluded they could not do because of the person in question.
It's seen as something of a win for both sides, and it's clearly something the Russian president intends to make political capital from at home. Vladimir Putin made a rare public appearance, meeting those returning to Russia at the airport and offering hugs, flowers and warm words. While the deal won't stop the war in Ukraine or mend broken ties between Moscow and the West, it is some rare good news for all sides.
And here is DW political correspondent Julia Sardelli with more on why Germany released a convicted murderer as part of the prisoner swap.
Well, as we've heard from Chancellor Olaf Scholz himself, it was not an easy decision to go ahead with this prisoner exchange. And the German government and Scholz himself had to weigh the state's interests in keeping someone sentenced for murder in jail with the safety, the health and the freedom of prisoners detained in Russia and in Belarus. And we have seen from how this has gone that the safety and the life of those prisoners has prevailed. And we've seen that 5 German citizens have also been freed. We've seen that Russian political opponents of Vladimir Putin have also been freed. And but this also comes because Olaf Scholz has also said of the friendship with the United States. Germany wanted to show itself in solidarity with the U.S., but also because of a certain pressure we can imagine coming from the U.S. counterparts trying to push Germany to finally agree on this release. And this prisoner swap could not have happened in this scope had Germany not agreed to release Vadim Krasikov.
So several of the exchanged prisoners, as you said, were German citizens. What do we know about them?
So the one name that has been more prominent in the news lately is that of Rico Krieger. He's a 29-year-old German citizen who had been sentenced to death in Belarus last June on accusations, among others, of terrorism and claims that he was acting on the orders of the Ukrainian Secret Service, the Ukrainian intelligence. These are all claims that have not been proven. And Rico Krieger, we've seen that the German government had been relatively quiet on his case. They wouldn't go into detail when asked about it. And he was suddenly pardoned by the Belarusian president on Tuesday. And these were all signs that were pointing to possibly negotiations going on in the background. Another German citizen is Kevin Lick. He is a German-Russian citizen, 19 years old. He had been accused of high treason and had been arrested when he was still a teenager going to school. We also have two other German-Russian citizens, one a lawyer and a cycling activist in St. Petersburg, and another political scientist. And finally, one other German citizen who had been arrested on arrival in Russia because he had been found in possession of 6 gummy bears containing cannabis, and he was accused of drug smuggling.
We'll leave it there for the moment, but thanks so much for joining us today. DW political correspondent Julia Sardelli. And DW's Riga bureau chief Yuri Risheta joins us for more on this prisoner exchange. Yuri, Vladimir Putin made it clear some months back that he was interested in the release of Vadim Krasikov. Why?
Vadim Krasikov plays one of the most important roles, I think, in this swap. We know that Putin personally advocated for him. He even admitted this in a TV interview. At the time, Putin said that Krasikov, as a Russian patriot, had eliminated a terrible criminal out of love for his country. In reality, this patriot is said to be a long-time employee of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, who may have committed the murder on behalf of the Russian state. For Putin, who worked as a secret agent, service agent for decades abroad too, for this Putin, who has said on several occasions, "Мы своих не бросаем," which means in Russian, we won't let our people alone with their problems, for this Putin, it was the chance to say to other Russian spies, hey, you can keep working for us. After all, it's not just Vadim Krasikov, and it's not just the other intelligence people who we saw yesterday at the Vnukovo airport, but many, many more abroad working for the Russian state.
The Russian president also took the unusual step of meeting Krasikov and the other alleged agents on the airfield. What was the message he was sending?
Yes, Putin himself came to Vnukovo airport yesterday evening, last night. That is a clear signal of honor he has shown. Together with Putin came high-ranking security politicians, head of the domestic intelligence service Bortnikov and head of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service Naryshkin. Putin hugged the murderer Vadim Krasikov, even if briefly. They will all see each other again soon in the Kremlin when they are awarded state honors. Putin promised it yesterday in the hall of Vnukovo airport. More honor is not possible. And of course, the Russians at home, in front of the TV, should see this. Look, the president and his people have won. But this is also a signal, I think, to the Western world. Russia can release its political prisoners, but not all of them. Because, let's keep in mind, this swap should have taken place in March with Alexei Navalny. After all, Putin presumably didn't want to release him.
And this is also the biggest prisoner exchange with Russia since the Cold War. Does it set some sort of a precedent?
Well, I think we are looking at a really historic moment here. This was the biggest exchange, you said it, since the end of the Cold War, involving not only many prisoners, but also many countries, and Western countries, Turkey, Russia. And that's never happened before. That shows that the politicians and secret services of these countries have contacts with each other and maintain these contacts with each other, undercover maybe. And this is happening regardless of the war in Ukraine. Turkey is playing a very important role as a mediator, and of course we would like to see this kind of success for all further possible negotiations, also for possible peace negotiations with Ukraine, if they take place at all one day.
Yuri Rishetto in Riga. Thanks so much for that. And we're now joined by Hans-Jakob Schindler from the non-profit counter-extremism project. Hans, welcome. Would this entire prisoner swap have gone through if Vadim Krasikov weren't involved?
No, I don't think that Russia was interested in any of the other individuals that were released. The key was this murderer, for really two reasons: to make sure that he gets rewarded for being willing to be an assassin, but also to make sure that there will be future assassins willing to do that. And no sooner were those Russian opposition politicians on an airplane into freedom, a Russian politician went on social media and said, these are all traitors and they better change their names because we are coming after them. So the cycle will continue. And for that to be able to continue, you need to get your murderers out of prison.
Russia's approach to arresting Westerners and then releasing them in exchange for its own citizens, I mean, this has been characterized as hostage diplomacy. Is that a fair characterization?
Well, I mean, it's hostage negotiations. I think the word diplomacy is, giving it a veneer of legitimacy that it really doesn't have. What happened here was very different from the Cold War, where Western spies caught by the Soviet Union were exchanged for Soviet spies caught by the Western countries. Here we do have spies and murderers on the one side, and opposition politicians and Western citizens who've been caught up and charged for ludicrous charges or sentenced to ludicrous sentences for small infractions. So there is no equivalence here in the exchange, except a moral duty for Western governments to protect their citizens from governments that are now pretty much run like a criminal organization.
Is this going to be the norm now in the coming years?
Difficult to predict what's going to happen in the future, but obviously Russia is not going to stop sending people into the West, to Germany, to other NATO countries. We are in a hybrid warfare. As I said, already those opposition politicians have been threatened by official Russian officials. So this will continue. And the sad truth is, if Russian spies and Russian assassins are caught in the West, we will have to expect again Western citizens to be arrested and arbitrarily charged in Russia.
We were talking about Vadim Krasikov earlier, released from Germany. So is it fair to say Germany played a key role here?
Absolutely. This was the most high-profile case and the most heinous case. This man is a murderer. And a German court found him to be a murderer, and a murderer on behalf of the Russian government. So this is, of course, the most difficult case to release a murderer only after just about 5 years in prison in exchange for some citizens who really did not have committed any serious crimes in Russia at all.
I'd like to talk about the role of Turkey here as well, because all of these exchanges happened under the auspices of the Turkish intelligence service. Is Turkey now effectively the bridge between Russia and the West?
Well, we have seen, not for the first time, that Turkey plays some kind of a mediator role. A lot of the prisoner exchanges of soldiers between the Ukrainian and the Russian armies have been negotiated and actually enacted in Turkey. Turkey has the advantage of being a NATO member, but not an EU member. So it is actually perfectly positioned on the fence between both worlds to be able to be a managing facilitator in these kind of very tricky situations.
We'll leave it there for the moment. Hans-Jakob Schindler with the Counter-Extremism Project. Thanks so much for coming into the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.